All right, in the last unit, we modified a program to add a second table to the database. Again, this isn't something you would normally do. Again, we're learning how to get to connecting to databases and connecting to a 16 table or 16 table database on the first go around. Probably not a good idea. So we first connected to a single table, and then we modified this program to connect to two tables. The concepts of connecting to two are the same as connecting to 3, 4, 16, whatever you need. Remember, for every one of our tables now, we've got an order table, we've got a customer table. Pretty much for every table in your database, you're going to have a business class to help manage it. All of our data requests are supposed to go through a business class. So if you have a table that you need to get data out of, how would you get it without going through a business class? So there's almost this one-to-one relationship there. And so that was one of the things we did, is created a new class. Then we modified our customer first name text box fields, turned them into a combo box so that we can look up customers. Because this is an autocomplete, I can type in some letters like T's and jump right down to the Thompsons. So even though there was a lot of names in that list, because it's autocomplete, I can just start typing a couple letters and narrow it down very, very quickly. When we built that, just as a quick review, not that any of this really matters today, but when we built it, that combo box, in form load, when we loaded the customers, we went to the customer class, said give me your lookup table for customers. We defined that last time. And then we said set your display member to the customer field and your value member to the ID field. The value member is hidden. It's behind the scenes. It's a field. Customer, because we assigned it to the display member, that's the field that we're going to display. Most of my lookups, particularly the ones that I'm throwing into a combo box, have two and only two fields. What do I want displayed in the combo box? And what's the ID number that correlates to it? The ID number is hidden behind the scenes. We can then get to that ID number by using the selected value field. So in display record, we said set the selected value for the combo box to whatever the current customer ID number is. Goes through that entire list and stops when it finds customer ID number 9, for example, and displays it. So to change them programmatically, you change the ID number, the selected value, to a corresponding ID number. Then where else did that show up? Selected value also had to set it. And then when we changed the combo box in the validating event, we took the selected value from the combo box. So not the name, but the selected value that's hiding behind the scenes, and transferred it back to the business class. What's always confusing to me is that selected value is the property that I use to get the actual number, customer ID 9. But the value member property is the name of the field, whose number you want. And that gets a little confusing, but if you follow the sample code here, you shouldn't have too much trouble. So now our form has the ability to get customer IDs. The one thing I think we forgot to do in this class, so let me double check it here, is what happens if I change the customer and say, no, that wasn't really Yves Beaupre, that was Volker Gall that ordered that pizza. If I change it, close enough, if I change it, does it change over here? No, we forgot that step. It occurred to me in the 4 o'clock class, so let's get it in the recording here. Where does that happen? That happens on save. So when I hit button save, we commented it out. There it is. Fix this. We commented it out because the text first name, last name, those text boxes are gone. Let me also mention that during RDD, Karen was bored, and so she was working on her programming logic class stuff, and discovered that in her program she doesn't have any concatenations, and she doesn't even need two fields or two tables to fill her grid. Good, glad you figured that out. You don't always need to, whenever we're filling a grid, doesn't always have to be 2 fields. Doesn't always have to be 2 tables. In my case, what I want in my grid comes from 2 different tables. The order dates from one table, the customer names from another. And again, it could be, we could be filling that grid from 6 tables, right? Potentially, if that's what we need. So you do still have to adapt the programs that you're writing based on your needs. Just because I use 2 tables in my lookup doesn't mean you need 2 tables. All right, the problem we have here is whenever I change customers, I want to transfer that customer's name into the grid. But I can't use the last name, first name. Where can I find the customer name? Since it's not there anymore. Not in those text boxes. Where is it? If I change this name and I hit save now, where can I copy the name from? Pardon me? I could get it from the data class and say, hey, you data class, I need your first name, last name concatenated. But aren't they right there? They're right there in the combo box. So I can transfer this text. It's already concatenated. Magic. Cool. Handy. Convenient. I can transfer it from the combo box. It's just text. Take the text in my combo box. Remember, combo boxes are pretty complicated beasts, right? They have selected indexes, they have selected values, they have display members, we can link them to data sources, but they still have text. And we can grab that text, and all I'm saying here is take whatever text appears in the combo box, stick that into the grid when I update. So I expect this to change to loop. Uh-oh. Customer column is read. Oh, why is my customer column read only?
Because that's how you set it.
That's how I set it. Well, I didn't set it, but where is it talking about? It's talking about my XSD. We talked about this briefly in Unit 2 or 3, that the customer column in my lookup right here, right, is read only. But that's not the one I'm trying to change. I made this mistake in the, I don't know if I made the mistake in the 4 o'clock class. I think I did. I changed this. Customer lookup, changed it to false. And my program still crashed. Because the grid is order lookups. It's this customer that it's complaining about that's read only. So I got to make sure I change the right one. I didn't set that to true. That happens automatically. Whenever you put a calculated field in your lookups, they're calculated. So they're read only. You're not allowed to change them. Well, in my case, I need to change them. So one more time. Now George is over there. So that was another little side step that we forgot. After we did all those conversions, something you'll have to do as well. When you convert from your DVD version 1 or your car maintenance version 1 database to the second one, you're going to have to add another class, modify the existing class to accept the linking field, modify the form to use a combo box, and a few other things. That's what part 4 is all about, is getting that second table in there and adjusting your program to adapt to it. Questions? Okay, so that's what we did last time, plus a little bit more. We just added that ability to update our grid whenever a new customer is selected. Now what we want to do is add the ability to insert. We can edit data all we want here, but we can't add new data. Talked about CRUD yesterday in RDD, and how we want to be able to create. That's first thing in CRUD, is create new records. For me, I never work it that way. I'm always more interested in reading an existing record, updating it, and then I start worrying about creating. So I want to be able to display records first. But some people like the process of, let's just create a brand new one and validate it, make sure it saves into the database first. That works. But I do create last. A lot of the code that we have, all the validating code, if it's a new record, are the rules for customer names any different? No. The rules for sodas, cheese sticks, and coupons different? No. So all of my validating events are the same. You'll find that many books have two forms, one for new records, one for existing records. So one for editing, inserting new records, and a different form for updating existing records. I've never found a significant difference in them. All the validating is the same. All the key press is the same. The forms look the same. The only thing a new record doesn't really need is this grid. The grid's not in my way. And in part 6, we're going to disable the grid whenever the user's inserting a new record, so they don't accidentally try to click on a different one while they're inserting before they've saved. We'll deal with that. So the grid's not a problem. All the rest of this is the same. Why would I use something different than a date picker for dates, than radio buttons for the size? Just because it's new. So we are going to share this form, which means all the validating events need to be shared. They are, it doesn't matter. The only thing that really changes is saving. When we hit save, some of the logic needs to be modified. And so what we need in order to handle that modification is a way to sense that we're working on a new record. We need a way to sense that so that we can tell the difference between saving an existing record and inserting a new record, because as you know from SQL, the commands are different, right? To insert a record, you use the insert command. To save an existing record, you use an update command. They're two different SQL commands. And so what we're going to end up doing is calling two different methods. When I hit save, this says call the, where'd it go? Oh, here's save record. Some of this stuff is going to change a little bit. Updating the grid is going to change, right? Because we're not going to be changing an existing one. We have to add a new record. So that's where this new record comes in. Is it a new record? And the other thing we're going to need to know is when we get to the business class and we say save, how much of the business class can we recycle? Pretty much all of it. Here's my save record. Notice the save record doesn't say update. It says save. So it doesn't matter whether it's new or existing. But here we're calling the update order method. Not good enough. We're going to need a new method to insert a new record. But first and foremost, what we need to do first is provide a way for our business class to tell the rest of the world this is a new record, not an existing record. How can we tell them apart? Two ways. First of all, if you're using an auto number field for a new record, and there's a flaw in our program, we never did modify the business class to instantiate, or to initialize, I should say, the order ID. The order ID is never initialized. If it's a brand new, fresh out of the box record, what should I initialize it to? No, that's an option. The problem with null is in order to have this be null, then my order ID needs to have a question mark on it so that it's nullable. And my property needs to have a question mark on it so it's nullable. And if I do that, I know I tried this before class. If I do that, then there's 60 different places where the order ID shows up, and I can no longer say order ID. I have to say order ID dot value. And the only reason I'm doing this is so that my business class knows whether it's a new record or not. So why don't we just do this? That way it doesn't need to be nullable. Let's set it to 0. Is that a legal ID number for an order in a database? No. So it's illegal. If it's still 0 when we're trying to save it, that's a problem, but it won't be. But what I can now do is say, if my order ID is 0, it's a new record. Must be, because that's the only way it'll ever be 0 if it's a brand new, never been saved record. I have, it's just a special value. So I can put a nice comment on here that 0 designates a new record. And it has to be new because I'm inside the constructor. That's what a constructor does, is it creates a new record. So 0 designates a new record. Then what I need is a method that checks to see if the order ID is 0. If it is, then it's a new record. I could use a method. I think my notes still say create a method right there. I'm going to change gears here. I'm going to create a property. What's the difference between a method and a property? Not a whole lot. And as a matter of fact, I think I might show you both because the code is simple. So let me start with a method, and I'm just going to tuck it right in between these regions here because when I'm done, I'm probably going to remove it. A method has to be public if I'm going to call it from the outside world. It has to return a value. This method is going to return a Boolean value. The name of the method is new record. Many Boolean methods and properties start with the word is so that you can say if is new record. Sounds like English. So I'm going to call it is new record. I don't have to send it anything. And this method simply returns whether or not the order ID, and I can even use, I have a property for that. There it is. I got the underscore. I could use the order ID. I just want to read it. If the order ID is still equal to 0. Semicolon. That's legal? Where's my if statement? Well, this sort of isn't. This returns a Boolean value. Doesn't this evaluate to either true or false? It either is 0 or it isn't. Notice the double equals. That is an equation that evaluates to a Boolean value, which is what this method is supposed to return. So here's what the method looks like. Let's create a property. This property doesn't even have to have a temporary variable or a member. I'm going to create a property without a member. This is new. It's also going to be public, though, not private, because it's a property, not a member. So it's public. What type is it? Boolean. What's it called? Is new record. And notice for properties, though, there's no parentheses. For properties, I have to provide getters and setters. No, this is a read only. I'm not going to set it. It's a read only, so it's just a getter. I'm going to say get, return the same thing, order ID double equals 0. So you can see they're very similar. Parentheses missing here. Get curly brackets missing down here. And notice I don't even get an error. One of them's a property, one of them's a method. C# can tell them apart. And so now whenever I want to know in my program, is this a new record, I simply say, an order is new record. That's all I have to say. However, there's a subtle difference. I don't even know where I need this yet. In button new, display, set focus, text to cancel, clear the radio buttons, if only calc if it's not a new order. Okay, so that's my calculate routine. Where do I do my calculations? Save. Yeah, right here. If it's not a new order, here's how I can find out. I can ask if an order is a new order. There's a new record, excuse me. If it is a new record, then don't calculate. So I can also say if not a new record. If it's not a new record, then calculate. Otherwise, set the order total dot text equal to the empty string, because if it's a new record, we don't have anything to calculate yet. Now, why am I getting an error? Ambiguity in my class. Interesting. It's saying I've got a new record without parentheses, got a new record with parentheses. Which one do you want? This is how you call a property, right? No parentheses. If I wanted the method, I'd need to put parentheses in here, and I'm still going to get my ambiguity. Oh, now they got it sorted out. That's the only difference between a method and a property, the way you call them. Methods have parentheses, always. Whenever you call a method, you must include parentheses in the call. If you're referring to a property, you don't. Doesn't like that, so I'm going to go into my class and I'm going to take the method back out. My advice is use a property. Makes it easy on whoever is using your class to call that. If you have properties. Now, one of the reasons in the past I've always written methods is languages like JavaScript don't have properties. Swift does. PHP does not. Ooh, who's got it, who doesn't? It's hard to remember sometimes. If there's no properties available, you have to use this method version. You have to use this one if there's no properties available in the language that you're using, because this technique works in all languages that have objects. All of them. This one only works if your language includes properties. So this is a read-only property. And now if I go back to here and run, it should be pretty happy. And here's my is a new order. Is this order a new record? Or new order? If you wanted to change it and call it is new order, you could do that. If it's a new record, then do the empty string, because there's the not. Otherwise, go ahead and do the calculation, because if it's not new, I should have all the stuff that I need to figure out the order total. That's not where it belongs, is it? Only calc, if not a new record. I think this needs to go in display instead. When I hit save, I better have everything I need to calculate the order. I'm not even calculating the total. Where'd it go? Wow. Really? Here's an existing record. No total. Oh, that's a problem. What happened to it? I honestly don't know. We must have forgot to put it in. So what I'm going to do is steal copy this code. Because saving, I should be able to calculate a new value. So I'm going to copy that. Now that I've copied it, I'm going to say when you're saving, just do it. Show the new order total. I've already checked. There's no errors. Since there's no errors, I should be able to calculate a total. Go ahead and do it. Call the business class, calculate the totals. If the business class has a problem with the totals, it'll yell at us. But when I'm displaying an existing record, here's my existing record. Show the calculated order total. Then I want to ask, is it a new record? Because if it's a new record, we're going to see here in a minute, I don't want to display this calculation. If it's not a new record, then go ahead and display it. Otherwise, skip it. So now I'm going to run this one more time, see if an existing record has. There's my total. Got a $4 coupon. That's going to, yep. And it should update as we go. And it does. So there's a couple little side steps. We forgot this somewhere along the way. What we've written is a method to, or a property, excuse me, read only, that lets me check to see if I'm working on a new record, because I only want to calculate if it's not a new record. Karen?
Is there a reason why this new record is in camel case?
As a property? Because I usually see it that way. What she's asking is, wouldn't this make more sense? Because all my other properties are title case. Nobody's ever brought it up before. Should still work. Still calculates. So, can't come up with one. Thank you. We'll leave that with a capital I. Doesn't really affect the call. It just looks a little different. Here's my is new record with a capital I. And remember, in C#, properties, all are title case. Here's auto size, right? Doesn't say is auto size. Maybe that's why I'm doing it. But no, that's a good point. We'll stick with that. All right, back here. Now, we're ready to start inserting some new records, please. I want to insert a new record. When does that happen? When I click on button new. So here's my button new event handler. Cut that and paste it up here where it belongs. In there. This method allows the user to insert a new record, a new pizza order. You know why I'm doing that? Because so many of you get so good at copying and pasting, and that catches you every time. A new pizza order into the database. Notice it doesn't say anything about new customers. This project, when I leave it, is not going to allow you to add new customers. It doesn't have the ability, I should say, to add new customers. If you want that ability, you're going to have to build a brand new form that asks what's the customer's name, first name, last name, what's their phone number. Save that. You're going to have to create a brand new form. Add more methods to the class. Every form, every table that you want to change pretty much gets its own form, gets its own class, and you have to repeat this whole process over and over and over again. There'll be a new button and a delete button and a cancel button and a save button for the other form. They all look very, very similar. So what does button new do? First of all, I'm going to instantiate a brand new pizza order. What do you mean brand new? We already have an order, yes. But at any given time, my programs display one pizza order. Right? On the form on the right-hand side, we can't display more than one. There's only room for one form, one pizza order over there. Now, I'm displaying a new one. I'm creating a new one and then displaying it. If I create a new one and display it, what happens? I create a new one which sets all of the values inside here to their original constructor values. So the pizza order is 0, the date's today, customer ID, size, all of these are false, nulls, ones. If those are all null and false, what happens when I display it? It displays basically a clear form. Displays basically a clear form. So when I say button new, I create a brand new, this creates a brand new pizza order and makes an order point to it. What was an order pointing to before? I had a pizza order here, and when I first launched my form, it was for Mr. Beaupre here, or however that's spelled. And an order was pointing to that. Now I've said, give me a brand new pizza order. Okay, brand new one. And make an order point to that. And I do this one. It was a copy of what was in the database. Who cares what happened to it? This is still in memory, by the way, but it's now lost in space. Imagine an astronaut untethered from a spaceship with no booster rockets. He's just floating around out there. And the cool thing about all of today's languages, you're so lucky, is they have a feature called garbage collection in them. They recognize, your language, this C# will recognize that this thing is no longer pointed to by anybody. It's memory owned by the program that's no longer used. And it releases it back to the operating system automatically. In my day, he says with a cane and a walker, in my day, we had to say, I'm not using that anymore. Release it back to the operating system and then time you to a new one. So you do that garbage collection. Very, very efficient. And it was designed for people just like you and me who don't have a clue, who don't want to have to worry about it. Who cares if it's gone? Just erase it for me later. Picture this little Wally guy running around in my program, cleaning up all the garbage that I'm not using anymore. That's what I picture. It's always running in the background, always sensing that there's a piece of memory out there. And I mean, I've checked it a couple of times. It's millionths of a second before it finds it and trashes it. So what this says is whatever you were pointing to before, I don't care, point to a brand new one and display it. Let's see how that works. New. What's your problem? Selected value equals customer. This customer ID is null. I cannot assign null to the selected value of a combo box. Is what it's telling me. The value, selected value, cannot be null. So what I need to add is a little bit of logic here that says check, see. Just like down here where I'm checking all the other nulls, now I need to check null for this one. If it's null, if the an order customer ID is, let's do again, not equal null, then do this. Otherwise, what do I want to do? What do I want to do to my combo box if it's a brand new customer? Empty string to what? Text. That's one way. I could also say cmb.selectedIndex equals -1. Should work. Text is fine. I want to wipe it out because it's a brand new record. It just couldn't, this couldn't handle it. Didn't we set this to null in like unit 6 when we were learning about combo boxes? Yes, we did. But it doesn't work here because we have a data source now. Because there's a data source tied to this combo box, we can't set it to null anymore. But we can wipe the text out. So let's see what that does. New, today's date, blank, This is appropriate, right? Because we in the constructor said make that 1. Well, what happened here? My checkboxes are all cleared out. Everything else is clear. Order total is wiped out, so that's good. All of that stuff's good, but what's going on here?
Is that the value from the previous method?
It is, because we came in here, and when I do a brand new one, what's my size? It's null. Because I looked, and in my constructor here, I set the size to null. I think I did that to prove to you that just a regular old string can be set to null. You don't make strings nullable. Some of you have done that. And then you run into errors. You don't make strings nullable because they're nullable by default. Don't need to. So you can set it to null, or you can set it to the empty string, whichever suits you when you instantiate it. But it's null. So when I say display the record, I walk down here and say, is it personal? No. Is it large? No. Small, medium? No, no, no. And there's no default. So it doesn't do any of those, and it leaves it, as Karen said, to whatever it was before. Just leaves it alone, doesn't change the radio. That's not good. So now what we need is another feature here that says you can get anything else. It's probably a new record. If it's not, we got an error. Okay. Wants a break, that'll get rid of the red squiggles. What do we want to do here? I want to clear all my radio buttons, right? Sounds good, but there's a problem. So I want to clear my radio buttons. So I'm going to say that that RDO large fine dot selected, checked, equals true, and then set it to false, right? Because that clears all my radio buttons. Yes? Crowd goes wild. The crowd is premature. There's a problem here. It's very subtle. If you didn't have the 23-year instructor here, you might not know, because it took me years to discover it. What's in my class? The last radio button changed, which was large. Because right here I said, check it. Uncheck it. Doesn't matter. I have a validating event and a selected change event. Where's my radio buttons? Probably tucked in here. I have an RDO size check changed event that says which radio button changed. Large. Make that the order size. Uh-oh. So now, even though my form is nice and clean, the size is large. Only because I decided to use large as my reset the radio buttons button. And before class, I was trying to come up with a solution. So here's my first solution. Okay, fine. Change the radio button. And while you're at it, when you're done, change the order.size back equal to the empty string. Not going to work. Because guess what? The empty string is not a valid value for size. And when I try to put it into the business class goes ERP. Can't do that. It's just not on the list. It's the new value here, empty string. It throws an exception. And the problem, well, why is it stopping? Why doesn't it just throw an exception to display one of those message boxes? Because there's nobody over here catching it. Whenever you throw an exception, somebody has to catch it. There's no try-catch block in this method to catch that error. If there's nothing to catch it, then the program crashes. I'm not worried about catching it. I don't want to cause that error in the first place. And so this is not the right solution. Couldn't I set it to some legal value? Well, what's the point? We're trying to wipe it out. I had to cheat and look. How did we solve this problem last year? The way we solved this problem was two parts. Remember my trusty dusty radio buttons here. This event fires every single time, whether I turn it on or I turn it off, right? Because remember, when you do this check changed event, if you switch from small to large, this first fires to turn off the small, and then fires again when you turn on the large. And most of the time, that doesn't cause any problems. But in this circumstance, it does. One of the things I showed you last year is, if you're concerned about that last semester, put an if statement in here and say, if the sender, which is a radio button, so I have to typecast it, if the sender as a radio button, oh, now I'm doing it twice. Not a good idea to typecast it twice. It takes time to do that. So now I got to modify my code a little bit here. I'm going to add a new variable that is a radio button. I'm going to call it RDO, and it's going to be the typecast of the sender. And now here I should just be using RDO. So wherever I had RDO sender, I can just say RDO.text. Don't even need the parentheses. And here, I now want to say, if the RDO, the radio button I'm looking at, is checked. If it's checked, do this, because we're changing to that radio button. If it's not, just skip it, because it's a false. It's where I'm turning the small radio button off. Why, when I'm turning off the small radio button, do I want to transfer small into the database? I don't. Because 30 billionths of a second later, I'm going to come back and say, no, I changed my mind. Large got checked, so make it large. So one way you can spruce this up a little bit is to say, only do this if it's checked. If it's checked, change the business class. If you're simply unchecking one, don't bother. Does that cause any trouble? Shouldn't. So let's test some of the other stuff that we got in there, like let's change the size to medium, save it, no problem. Doesn't mean it worked. Come back to this one, go back to that one, it doesn't seem to have a problem. But now when I hit new, I have an opportunity that we haven't seen before. This group box is called group size. That's good. So now in my display, this is all about clearing those radio buttons in here. I can't do that. That doesn't work. It messes up my size. What I want to do is set every one of my radio buttons to false. Because when they set to false, what happens down here? What does it do to the business class? Nothing. So I can clear them all and not change that empty string, the null, that I currently have in my database, if I set them all to false. I could hard code it, right, and say RDO personal.checked as false, RDO small.checked as false, RDO medium.checked as false, RDO large.checked as false. I could put 4 lines of code in here to do that. That's not bad. Or we can practice our for each loops. For each radio button, let's call it R, RDO, in group size. I think that's legal. For each radio button in group size, what do I want to do? I want to say RDO.checked equals false. Is it 2 words in this language? Cannot operate on variables of type group box. In group box dot controls. Remember this from earlier on in the course? You're happy now? Now it's happy. What I am guaranteeing my program here is I guarantee you there will be nothing in that group box except radio buttons. If there's anything else in there, this program is going to crash because it's going to try to turn a checkbox or a label or something into a radio button and it will crash. But I know that every single one of these is a radio button inside of my group box. So I can safely say, I promise you, you'll be able to turn it into a radio button. For every one of the radio buttons, set it to false. 2 lines of code instead of 4, big deal. But in your DVD programs, you have 5, 6 genres. That's 6 buttons that you got to turn on. In your, I don't know if it's shop or what it is, or which vehicle. There's only 3. That's not so bad. You could just say, turn every one of them off. Now I'm going to put a breakpoint here, and I'm going to run my program. And run it again until I get a nice clean screen. Here we go. And I'm going to say new. When I say new, it's going to wipe everything out. And when I come down here, I'm done now. All my radio buttons have been deselected. What's in an order? An order's got false, false, false. Let's drop it down. I want to know what size you got. No. The size is still null. Because we set all these to false, none of this code ever executed because we hit this if statement. Is it checked? No. Skip it. Is it checked? No. Skip it. So the business class never got set. All that just to clear radio buttons. So now what we have is the ability to enter new data. Because now I can come in here and try to set the date. Can't set it to the future. That's good. But I could set it back a couple of days. I can pick a customer, but what if he's not on the list? Then my error marker shows up. Same stuff. Back to Eve again. I get stuck on him. All right. And now what happens if I leave? I don't think anything happens here. But as soon as I click one, large pizza, then it's happy. I can pick my toppings just like before, change my mind. Change the number of pies. Can't go down because it's a numeric up down. Skip the soda, put in 1,000 cheese sticks and say, no, 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 we can't have that many. Coupon, $25, I don't think so. Everything's still working to allow me to insert a new record. So now that whole process that we just went through was first of all to clear that screen. Clear that screen so that we can enter new data. But now, after the break, we need to handle the save. Because when I hit button save, what's going to happen? Let's walk through it before we take a break. When I hit button save, it's going to say calculate an order total. Well, that should be okay because at this point, I have everything. As long as there's no errors on the form, it should try to calculate an order total, and then it's going to go into save record. Now, we already saw that save record has a problem because all it knows how to do is update existing records. We need to modify that. But then we have another problem is that we're going to update the grid, but we're going to replace the current customer name and the current order date with the new one. That's not good. This is a replace. This says take whichever current row is, change the customer name to whatever's on the form. Uh-oh. Change the date to whatever's on the form. No, thank you. Then resort. So what we need to do is modify this update to grid to add the new one to the grid. We need to modify that. So we got two things when we come back that we're going to be modifying. How the save functions in the business class. So the business class can sense that I have a new record and insert it instead of update it. And how do we update the grid? So that the grid shows us that new pizza order that we just added in the appropriate place, etc. That's what we're going to do after the break. Take 10.